Dr. Ranaweera to kick off the session, and I would kindly like to inform all of you that you can send your questions to the chat box and to kindly keep your mics mute during the session. Over to you, Dr. Ranaweera.
Thank you, Ashila,
Welcome.
Thanks everyone for joining today. Yeah, thanks to the Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority for arranging this presentation, which is a very timely topic. So in this presentation, I try to go over, all the, the known issues which I have, seen, experienced or predicted by the utilities I have worked with in integrating renewables, high concentration renewables. So I'll be taking examples from various, RTOs and utilities in the United States, and also some examples from what the Australian grid operator AEMO did, and also some examples from Hawaii, the island of Oahu in Hawaii, which is a small island utility, which is very, similar to the Sri Lankan system. This being an island utility, island grid, not connected to any, other large grid. So yeah, so I'll be taking these issues one by one, and then I'll try to, explain what other utilities are doing to, manage and mitigate these issues. Okay, so to my first slides here. All right, good, thanks. All right, hope you can hear me, and also you can see the presentation now.
Yes, can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was on the second slide here. Okay, good. Yes, so right, so how do we achieve this? Okay, and so the first thing, as I said, is we should learn from what other grid operators are doing. For example, develop an integrated system plan, as the AEMO and various other utilities have done, and have a modern up-to-date generation dispatch system. I mean, I believe you all have a good dispatch system, and make sure that it's a good dispatch system which can send set points at 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes periods, right? Yeah, and so I think that one of the things I will show is that primary frequency response from all generators in the system, or all large generators in the system, is also important. And addition of grid scale energy storage systems. I will show how the energy storages help this situation. Right? And perform all planning and operation studies using up-to-date and validated grid models. And also in operations, in real-time operations, use proper tools to monitor system stability in real time using proper tools. Now, this is not something new to all the power engineers in this group. I'm sure there's a lot of you, who understand this very well. This is just for, for everyone else, I would say, right? And we know that power systems are complex, right? Power grid is the most complex, technological system humans have ever built. Okay? And as you all know, the grid frequency and sure. Yes. So yeah, power grid is the most Okay, yeah, it's one of the most complex systems, and the grid frequency and the voltage has to be within the specified limits to ensure safe and reliable operation of the grid, right? Then we know there are reliability standards which requires that the utilities maintain the frequency and voltage within safe and stable limits, right? And so what keeps the frequency stable is the generation equal to generation being equal to the loads plus losses, right? If the generation is too low, the frequency goes down, and the generation is too high, the frequency will go high, right? And as all power engineers know, reactive power shortage or surplus can lead to variations in voltages, right? Reactive power deficiency can create voltage dips and also can lead to voltage instability, and even as all the power engineers know, even voltage collapse, right? So yeah, reactive power is an important part of the thing. And moving to the next slide. Okay, intermittency in renewables. Good. So this is one of the main things people bring up when talking about wind and solar, right? Because wind and solar are intermittent sources of energy, right? For example, what happens if wind stops blowing, right? Or solar, the sun doesn't shine. Okay. So what utilities do in various parts of the world is use high quality weather forecasting services, right? For example, I mean, they are for forecast weather, and based on that forecast the wind and solar potential, right, over the next 7 days for every hour, right? And this is it continues for every hour. You get the weather forecast for the next 168 hours, and based on that, utilities, or the RTOs, so the grid operators, have tools to forecast the generation potential of every solar and wind generator in their footprint. Okay, so this is used very, very widely, and I'm taking some examples from ERCOT, some some of their presentation. So they posted these results where from 2012 to 2016, right? So their maximum error in their day-ahead forecast, right, was 12.3%. So that is like day-ahead is today they forecast the load as well as resources, generation resources for tomorrow, right? So hour ahead is at this hour, beginning of this hour, you forecast for the next hour, right? So that is, you can see that the hour ahead is better, right? In the the forecast. So with that type of error, and we know that there's also always an error in the load forecast, right? Because nothing is absolutely 100% to the forecast, right? And then make sure that enough generation resources are available for the next day and the next hour, right? In the day ahead, they prepare for the next day, and in every hour, they make sure that the resources are lined up for the next hour based on the resource availability, okay? And so what I'm showing here in this picture is a picture actually from ERCOT. It's one of the RTOs in Texas, which I'm very familiar with, which I've been working with them for a number of years now. So what it shows is how they and all other RTOs, grid operators do. So wind and solar are used as load modifiers. So in other words, as we discussed earlier, the generation dispatch has to match with the load plus losses, right? So what they do is they take the consumer load forecast, right, and then minus the wind generation forecast, minus solar generation forecast, and that gives you the modified load forecast, right? So now dispatch your generation to meet the modified load forecast, right? So this is how the system is managed, okay, to balance the frequency. Okay? And in real-time operations, so the generators are sent dispatch set points. Okay, so every generator in the system, okay, is sent a dispatch signal, right, frequently. Okay, in ERCOT it's 5 minutes. In most RTOs it's 5 minutes because they also have much more complicated the market systems and so on. So that's the way it is managed, right? And so then the question is, what happens if sudden loss of generation occurs? So what happens if, with all these forecasts, wind stops blowing or the sun stops shining, right? So this is also similar to in the non-renewable scenario, a large generator trips, right? For example, there are large generators like say nuclear power plant or something, large. I mean, if one unit trips, a lot of generation is lost, right? So utilities are prepared for these. So they know these things can happen because these are N-1 event, for example, right? I will explain what N-1 also in the next few slides, right? So what they do is they line up additional resources such as load resources. Okay, so what these load resources are, the loads that are ready to be dropped offline in the event of an emergency like a large generator trip, and they get paid for that. They get paid for being they are standby to be dropped, right? Because their load doesn't have to run every minute of the day, every minute of the year, right? So they can come back online after a few minutes when they can manage their business. Okay, so and during this period, okay, and I will show in the next slide actually. So this is a very important diagram, and this is from NERC as well as ERCOT. Let's use these things to explain how things are done. So you can see the most important time period here is the RST period. So what this shows is for everyone's information. So the y-axis or the vertical axis is the system frequency. So this shows 60 hertz, right? Because this is from North America. So in Sri Lanka it will be 50 hertz, right? So yeah, so system frequency, and the x-axis or the horizontal axis is the time. Okay, and the time also is the first 30 seconds is shown here in the first block, which is called the frequency containment period, and then the scale is in minutes, right? 10, 20, and so on. So so as you can see here, so when a large generator is stripped or generation is lost from wind and solar, right? The frequency starts dropping. Okay, so this initial okay, so this first few seconds, like 6, 7, 8 seconds is very important because that is a time. I mean, like you have to act fast to stop the drop, right? So this is called the frequency nadir, the lowest dip there, right? So you have to do everything possible to keep that as high as possible in this case, right? So what happens is that, as I said earlier, the primary frequency response, from generators. Okay, so this is automatic response. So in North America, all generators are required, right? All large generators are required to provide primary frequency response as a reliability requirement. Okay, so which means that if the frequency drops, the generation increases. Okay, and done through the governor, right? And then also, if the frequency goes up, the generation decreases. So there's a small, support each generator is providing. Okay, so the generators are not responsible to fix the frequency, but they are required to do the proper action to help system stabilize the frequency. Okay, so every generator has to combine. So this helps a lot, right, in managing the frequency within the limits. Okay, so that is one thing that comes automatically, and then the load resources drop, and then so with that you manage that the attestation period works out there, and then is the rebound period. So as you can see, what happens is now, so after about 8-9 seconds, so this, the new generation has come in because the load dropping is equivalent to generation addition, right? So it helps to balance. So the frequency starts improving, right? So the frequency starts going up, as you can see here. And so then by this time, now, since the frequency is coming up, so the primary frequency response is low now. So it tries to get settled here, right, in the next few minutes, right? But then about this time and coming up to here, the frequency restoration from the turbines are responding, because the turbines are slow to respond because there are mechanical time constants which are much larger than the electrical time constant. So now the turbines are picking up, the remaining synchronized generators, and for example, what is called the spinning reserve, right? So the what is left on the generators, as spinning reserve is picking up, and so that improves. So after about 30 seconds, that starts to bring the frequency up, right? So then, as things go further up, the grid operator manages to bring the replacement reserve. That is the generators which were offline, right? Because they couldn't be brought up in seconds, right? But they can be brought up in minutes. Okay, so by that time, things are getting back to normal and frequencies get stable. So this is the process, the concept that is followed by utilities to manage frequency variation. Okay, I'll go to the next slide here. So this shows the concept called fast frequency response that comes from batteries. So which is new, right? So batteries, started, being connected to grids, the grid utility scale batteries, over the last more than 5-6 years or maybe about 10 years, since about 6-7 years, right? They have been coming in, and so what the battery can do is they can inject a large amount of power in a very short period of time, like in 1 to few cycles, right? So you can see this, the brown or cream area here, right? And see, without batteries, we had only this part, right? But now with batteries, you see, you can fill this part here too. So now with the help of batteries, you can really manage these things in a much better way. So because of this, ERCOT recently introduced this service called fast frequency response. Earlier they had somewhat different service called FRRS. It's called fast responding regulatory service, right? But they changed it to this new product called fast frequency response. So, but yeah, so then the batteries, which is a new technology, is helping bring the, keep the frequency in balance. So some words about battery energy storage, because I've heard people say that batteries are not real, and they are, they are in, research stages and so on. It's true that research is being carried out into the batteries, but however, today there are thousands of megawatts of batteries in use in, supporting grids, right? So as I said earlier, they can inject energy very fast in 1 to few seconds, and also the other advantage that they can be installed in relatively short period of time, right? Like less than 1 year. Okay? In less than 1 year, you can install like 100 megawatt, 2-hour, 4-hour battery, right? Of course, some studies have to be done, in parallel or, in advance, but installation time is very quick. Okay. So this is an example of a picture of battery installation in a solar farm. So this picture has been taken at, the picture was taken from a, like a behind or, from a special angle, which shows the solar panels also. And you can see the solar panel arrays, and the batteries are the ones in those containers, right? So there seems to be like 6 containers here. There's a lot of megawatt hours here, right? And you can also see the air conditioning unit, because they need cooling, right? Because there's a lot of heat generated there, and the cooling functions have to happen, right? And yeah, so this is why they can be installed very quickly. Okay, they come in modules and so installed like this. Okay. So these are some statistics about how much of batteries are have been installed, right? So that worldwide total, I found that it's about 1,800 megawatts by 2020, and I believe that number should be more, but that's the number I found. However, I know that California in the United States, the state has about 500 megawatts as of 2019. Okay, and this is out of about 1,500 megawatt they have approved. They had approved by that time, by the California Public Utilities Commission has approved it. And there's a lot more in the pipeline. This is 2021, so these things are happening very fast. Okay, and Texas, I found the accurate statistic there, like 532 megawatts as of 2020, okay, installed and in operation, and additional 1,238 megawatts to be synchronized in 2021 this year. Okay, so you see how fast these things are happening, right? So if you look at the interconnection queue, right? That's a list of generators that are going to interconnect to the grid. There's like gigawatts of batteries, multiple gigawatts of batteries ready to be connected in the next few years in ERCOT and various other RTOs. And pump storage height, right? So the picture shows the Ludington pump storage unit on Lake Michigan, right, in the United States. So this was built in the late 70s. So this is not any new technology, right? So built in the 70s to store, excess energy from nuclear plants, for example, during nighttime. However, I mean, the capacity of that is 2,200 megawatts, 2,200 megawatts, huge, and can store 19, almost 20,000 megawatt hours, right? It's about 8 to 9 hours of energy, right? But 2,000 megawatts for 9 hours, right? It's a lot of energy, right? So it can store there. So how it operates is like during nighttime when there's a lot of wind, right? And there's not much load to absorb that wind. So the pumps work and then pump the water from the Lake Michigan to the reservoir. So the reservoir is here, right? It's at a higher level than the Lake Michigan, right? So the reservoir is filled during that time. And then during the peak times when power is needed, so there they have the energy market also. The power prices are low at night time, power prices are high, when the peak time comes. So the water flows back, right? Water is sent back through the same machine, which now act as generators, right? And they generate power, right? So this is daily operation, and then it's been happening for so many years. Okay, and in Sri Lanka, one of the possibilities is like the hydropower reservoirs we have in tandem, like we know that the Mahavali system, right? There are reservoirs in tandem, and I think I'm aware that CB had some projects to consider these things. So this should be considered as to be converted for large-scale energy storage. And these are not for quick response. The quick response is from batteries, but this will be very good for large-scale energy storage to be injected to the grid when needed. And weak grid issues. So this is one of the most common concerns people are talking about with renewables. So what is weak grid? So basically, so what is happening is that when you have this high concentration of inverter-based resource, so that is inverter-based solar as well as hydropower, sorry, not hydro, the wind, right? So wind and solar, right, these are called inverter-based because when wind turbine generators, what we call type 3 and type 3 and after, there's a converter system there, right? Electronic, inverter-based converter system. So they are all called inverter-based resources. So with inverter-based resources being, the inverters control the short circuit current and so on, and the electrical engineers understand this thing. And so the concern is that because of this the weak grid situation, the voltage instability can occur, right? And also there could be some situations where the angle separation could occur over large distances, the generation on one side and the loads on the other side. So instability, so this could lead to instability is the concern, right? So specific to this wind and solar type resources. So, so for example, the Urquhart Panhandle area, right? And this is one of the reasons is that this is so far away from the load centers. It's like 400 plus miles from the central Texas load centers, right? And so in the high wind area, the load is almost zero. There's no load really, because not much is happening over there. And so no load there, and all the generation, which is like several thousand megawatts, 3,000 plus megawatts of wind power, like especially like nighttime, has to be exported over fairly long lines to the load centers as the diagram shows. Okay, so this is the recipe for this weak grid type issues, right? Yes, so the issues are there, and also few synchronous generators, right? So there's not much of synchronous generators in this area where the wind farms are connected, right? So that's part of the problem, right? So let's see how they handle this, right? So so they have been studying these things, and they discover these potential issues through simulation studies. So they always study for future scenarios. Okay, so they know that this much of wind power is coming in here in the next few years. So what is going to be the situation? So they take. So one of the things for these studies is to use proper tools and use proper models. Because if you don't have proper models, you don't get good results, right? So good validated models and do the simulations ahead of time, and then be prepared for that. Okay. So, and they also introduce real-time monitoring tools, right? So because they, in addition to the studies, in the studies they identify stability constraints and stability interfaces, right? Like, okay, if you try to transfer this many megawatts across this interface, so there could be a stability problem. So what they do is, so in operations they put limits. Okay, if the stability limit is, let's say, 2,000, we'll stop the transfer at 1,800 megawatts, right? So keep a margin, right? You don't go to 2,000, right? So, and then what happens is the generator is curtailed. Okay, until a permanent fix is found, generator is curtailed to maintain the stability. Okay, and so the other problems are, as I said, the permanent solution will be increasing grid connectivity through more transmission lanes, and also provide more dynamic reactive support, StatComs, and so on, right? And at identified locations. So all are done through studies beforehand, right? Knowing what's the generation mix. Okay. And also one of the things that should be done, if at all possible, is to interconnect renewable generation as close as possible to load centers, or load centers and synchronous generators. So this is why I say that proposals to connect these the solar farms, right, the floating solar farms and so on in the Mahaveli reservoir areas where there's already the hydropower generation is a very good idea, because that avoids, you're connecting internet-based resources close to synchronous generator. So this is it's a very good strategy to manage this kind of issues. So transmission congestion. So this is not a as bad, and it's not a stability issue per se, because this is a steady state transmission thermal rating violation. So what happens is in high window solar areas, right, when like nighttime, when the wind blows heavily, or when there's a lot of sunshine, and this happens usually during night times, when the wind is high, and in daytime it's less likely because generally the load is high too. But of course it can happen if there's a lot of solar farms in one area, and it has to come out of the region, right? So what happens is basically the generation is too much, and there's so much generation, and the transmission is not enough to take that generation out of the area load centers, right? So to stop wires being, the rating limits are violated. So the grid operator orders the plants to curtail themselves, right? There's power plant controllers, so just automatically you can set the plant to curtail, right? So basically, the power plant controller sends signals to each wind turbine or the inverter to curtail the production, right? And so that takes care of the condition issue, right? And so if the plant fails to follow orders, excuse me, the utility can trip the plant, right? So it could happen really, I know. And so that's the solution there, right? Now, in terms of getting there, one of the important things is, as I mentioned earlier, an integrated system plan. So I think the grid planners should consider, not consider, I mean, they should include the renewable energy integration into their plan, right? Build an integrated system plan. A good example is what was done by the Australian grid operator AEM. There could be other examples, but I happen to follow that and participate in some of their webinars because we had some interest in my previous company, where we set up some wind farms there. So when I saw that plan, I really liked that, what they have done, how they have done that, and it's massive. Basically, they are targeted to integrate over 30,000 megawatts of wind and solar generation, right? Replacing its entire coal-fired generation by 2040. Okay, so this Australia has their own coal, right? They have coal in their ground, right? Still, they decided to take this path, right, to generate clean power. Okay, so and we end up importing coal or gas, everything. Okay, so yeah, so something to keep in mind, what you can do by having an integrated system plan. And so this plan, as they show in the report, and this is the plan they update every 2 years, I believe, yes. I think there's one in 2018 and there's a 2020 plan too. So they update this plan every 2 years. And so this is expected to deliver market benefits up to about 11 billion, right? After all these things are done, I mean, they have to build new transmission because in Australia the grid is it's very like a long transmission lines, and the wind and solar farms are far away from load centers, right? And so they have to strengthen the grid, and they have to spend money on those things, but then they show that at the end there's a net benefit. Right? It's considered to be the fastest energy transition in the world, and yeah, so it's a 20-year plan, update every 2 years. Okay? So I think it's a very good example to follow. And island of Oahu, as I told you, people say that, okay, so those are big countries, United States, huge, grids are, gigawatts and all that. However, if you take the island of Oahu, it's an island smaller than Sri Lanka in the size. Yeah, size-wise, it's much smaller than Sri Lanka, but the grid is about 25% smaller than that of Sri Lanka, the total load, right? There's no connection to any other island or to the mainland United States, right? It's too far from any of those locations, right? So their total firm generation capacity is about 1,800 megawatt, right? And they have a variable generation capacity of wind and solar, about 780 megawatt. They don't have hydro. We have hydro here, but they don't have any big hydro plants. So all the renewable generation is coming from wind and solar. Okay, and so you see they manage that, right, even now, and they don't have they don't have any storages installed based on the documents I checked recently. They have all their future wind and solar farms are coming with storage, right? So they include storage going forward, right? But right now they are managing this without any large storage systems, right? So, but their target is to get close to 100% of electricity from renewable resources by 2040. Okay, close to 100% by 2040, and reach 100% renewable by 2045. Okay, so so what they do is, yes, again, integrated resource plan, where they plan to integrate renewables, rather than trying to keep renewables out or something like that. Okay, so another thing I have seen is what Hawaii and also even Australia, and also even in United States, everywhere, the planning process is an open stakeholder process, right? So a lot of people participate in planning meetings, right? So the actual studies are done by engineers, in the RTOs, but the study approach, the inputs to studies, what models are using, what is being studied, what assumptions are made, and so all these things are done in open forums, right? So there's nothing is kept to like one group or one party, right? Everyone gets a chance to provide their inputs: consumers, generating entities, regulators, and other entities which are, tasked by the government for, ensuring that there's more renewable energy integrated to the system, right? So everyone is involved in the process, and then they get the opportunity to provide feedback. So this helps create a good environment where all the inputs are considered, and there's less controversy at the end, when the decision is taken. Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, primary frequency response. So I think I addressed this one earlier, because primary frequency response, as I mentioned, is, that is like, it's like keeping the car in the road, right? So without primary frequency, the car can run, off the road, and then it's on the, slope down the hill. And then if you try to, stop the car once it is on the slope, it's hard, right? So the best thing is to keep the car on the road, right? So that's what primary frequency is doing, in a different, analogy. Okay. So example is ERCOT, where while they added, thousands of megawatts of wind generation, they were able to, get a better frequency response by, narrowing the PFR bandwidth. Okay, so these are PFR bandwidth that's like so there again, it's a 60 Hertz system. So originally it was 0.034 Hertz plus minus bandwidth. They made it to 0.017, and so basically the PFR response comes when the frequency deviates from 0.017, like when it is like 60.017 or 60 minus 0.017, the PFR comes into action and provides the generation, or absorb generation. So frequent generation dispatch. I think I talked about this too earlier. Yeah, you should have a good modern generation dispatch system. Over there in ERCOT, I mean, they send these dispatch signals every 5 minutes, because when you have renewable sources, you have to be able to command other generation to respond to varying system conditions, weather conditions and so on, right? So yeah, it's very, very important that you have a good dispatch system. And potential foreign exchange savings. So this calculation, I did these calculations, basically using Lassad's LCOE, levelized cost of energy, right? So this was published. I mean, I put that on LinkedIn. I think about a year ago. I think last year. It was last year, and yeah, basically, so based on the Lassad's levelized cost of energy, these are standard figures used by banks, in many parts of the world. So they have levelized cost of energy for wind, solar, and all the other resources like coal, gas, considering all the factors, that includes the capital plus operating costs, right? So in other words, the levelized cost of energy is the price at which the generator can sell to another party, right? So he has to cover all his costs, right? He has to cover his capital cost and the operating cost, right? So that's the price. So it's given in dollars per megawatt hour, right? So I showed that we could save as much as 500 million annually on fuel imports, like if we go to 80% of the country's need by 2030 electrical needs. So, I mean, I did few cases of, I mean, right now it's like 40%, right? 40%, 60%, 80%, and 100%. But yeah, I showed that those are the numbers, and that was considering even. I mean, the second bullet where I'm showing is what I'm showing here is the unit cost. So right now, it's about 20 rupees per kilowatt hour, as I understand today here, right? And so the unit cost comes down because the renewables are cheaper, right? And then the transmission cost will go up, right? Because you have to build more transmission, right? You have to strengthen the transmission because the wind resources and solar resources could be, for example, wind potential in Manam, onshore, offshore, so on. And you have to strengthen the grid. You have to build more transmission, right? And then you have to install storage units and, maybe build pump storage, hydro, and so on. There'll be a higher transmission cost. So at the end, my figures are that it could be 15 rupees per kilowatt hour, and I think when I did this calculation, I did the conversion at 190 rupees per dollar, okay? Yeah, so basically it will get lower than what it is right now, okay? So the calculations, the details are posted on LinkedIn. And so I'd like to finish this presentation with a statement from the great President John F. Kennedy, right, who said in 1962 that, he set the targets and the vision by saying, let's put a man on the moon in this decade. Right? So when he said that, no one knew how to do that, but they decided that these people took up the challenge and went ahead and got it done, right? And we know what it did, to the country. I mean, it lifted the entire country. There were so many technological advancements, and so on. And I mean, we know the history there. So that's I think as engineers, this is our contribution, to not do just the easy things, but do the hard things. I know we all do that, and just keep that in mind. Okay, and so I'd like to end the presentation right now and see if there's any questions. Thank you. Yeah, so I see some questions here. So let's see if I can answer these questions. What is the battery technology that is being used? Okay, so it's the lithium ion is most popular right now, and there's a lot of other technologies being studied. Okay, so it's like the prices are coming down and more new technologies are coming up, but lithium ion is the most popular. Okay, so the next question is, all the solar power and wind power used to generate energy as renewable energy, why is there still no research being done in Sri Lanka to generate wave power? Well, I don't know that I can answer that question. It's good to do research, but I think we also have to. I think it's prudent always to, I mean, that's not just prudent, but it's practical to work on. I mean, like when you do like generation planning, or like you build power plants, you go for proven technologies. Not to say that this is not doable, but okay. And is Sri Lanka grid weak at present? I don't think so, but I think this is an answer. This is a question to be answered by the Sri Lankan, the grid planners. So I'm not saying it's weak or strong from my point of view here. How about the unit cost of electricity in Hawaii, which is similar to Sri Lanka, rather average selling price? I don't have that number here, but it is not as cheap as the mainland United States. Okay, Hawaii electricity prices are a bit more expensive than the mainland United States because they have to import all the fuels, right? And this is why actually they went for renewables, because they were spending a lot of money buying oil for power generation. So thank you. And yeah, so I'll tell you, in the United States, I live in Texas, and you know, the wholesale price, right? The wholesale price of power in the energy market is like 30, about 30, right? In ERCOT, and in most other areas, 30 or even lower than that. So $30 per megawatt hour comes to, if you convert to dollar at 200 rupees, it's like 6 rupees per kilowatt hour, right? So look at that, right? So the wholesale price of 6 rupees per kilowatt hour, right? I mean, they are really cheap with all these things happening, because people ask like, okay, storage is expensive, wind is expensive, and transmission is expensive, but after all these things, power comes at a very low price. Okay, and also just to mention that when they build the CREST system in a car in the Panhandle area to get this wind power to the load centers, right? Because like Texas Panhandle is like wind mecca, so there's like so much wind there, right? So they spend I don't have the number yet, but the state spend billions of dollars to build this transmission network, right? But they recovered that cost in less than the time period anticipated. I think the anticipated payback was like 7 years, but they recovered that much earlier because of the low cost of renewables. Okay, so it pays for itself pretty fast. Okay, what you invest for renewable integration. So share the details of Hawaiian Island to get a better comparison Sri Lanka. So energy price, percentage power mix. So I provided some of the mixes, some of the numbers there. The island of Oahu, I provided the generation mix, about 1,800 megawatt in thermal generation and 800 or so in wind and solar, right? The unit prices are a little bit more than what I mentioned in the mainland United States. Okay. So this question 6: to what extent should system operators require VR generators to incorporate storage? Okay, yeah. So the question here is, to what extent should storage be incorporated with VRE? So what's happening is, so it's a very good question. I think I will explain how it happens. So if I take United States, where I'm very much familiar with what is happening in different RTOs. For example, California, right? The California Utilities Commission. Remember, I showed you those numbers where they called for storage, right? So the Utility Commission of California mandated utilities in the state to procure energy storage, okay? Because they wanted to promote renewable energies, right? They said you must procure renewable energy. You must procure storage, right? So that people can do more renewables and grid can be made stable. So what I mean by procuring means the developers like us, various developers, they build their storage systems, right, at locations identified by them, and then so they provide the services for a fee, right? So the owner and the operator is the company that built them, but they get paid for the services, right? So that's the model in California, right? But when you come to a state like Texas or ERCOT, so the Texas Commission took a different approach, right? So basically, one of the utilities proposed to install batteries. The transmission entity said, we want to install batteries. And they wanted to, when they do that, like when the utility, the regulated utility does something, they have to rate base that, right? So they had to get the approval from the commission. So the commission said no, because they viewed the battery as a generator. Because so in a deregulated market, which is a little bit more advanced than what we have here, in a deregulated market, the generation, transmission, and distribution are separated, right? So the distribution company is now asking to install batteries. The commission said, well, that means you're going to the generation business, so we can do that. So there's some debate going on there. So however, okay, so that's that part of it. But then, but what is happening is that we are building energy storages in Texas. As I showed you, this thousands of megawatts being built. So how that happens is that developers build and then they participate in the energy market, right? So when the energy prices are low, they charge the batteries. The prices are high, they discharge the battery. So with the price difference, it's called energy arbitrage. So they make a profit, after covering the cost of generation. So there's no restriction there. You can connect batteries, transmission, distribution everywhere. There's a lot of energy storage are being built like that. Okay. Hope that answers that question. Yeah, they can be integrated to distribution as well as transmission. So a lot of detailed questions, and I think we'll have to separately do research to answer these questions. How batteries are disposed in large scale after recycling phases are also right. I mean, so when we set up battery storage unit, so these things are also considered. I mean, yeah, I don't have the details of that, but those things are being considered. The prices are being considered. So for the calculations for 80% renewables, so there's no separate energy storage price included. That is considered as part of the grid improvements, the transmission cost, right? Because energy storage are not that expensive. It's all included in the transmission, transmission improvements. Yeah, so can't you run a training workshop for CB engineers about integration of RE to the national grid? I'll be glad to share my experience. I mean, I wouldn't call it training CB engineers. I know a lot of smart, educated folks, graduated from the same university I graduated from. So on. So yeah, I'll be glad to help. I mean, I'll be glad to share my experiences, go into details. I mean, I'm sure these are a lot of detailed questions, so I'll be glad to do that. I think I answered this question about generation cost of solar, wind, and solar plus storage. So it's all market prices, right? So it's energy market. It's based. So it's based on the it's called LMP, locational marginal prices. So the price in Houston is much higher than price in Panhandle, right? The Panhandle prices can go even negative, right, due to the PTC and all this. So it's not a fixed price. So the price is determined by the location, because the locational marginal price, right? So when you calculate your economics, right? So you take into account future conditions. Could there be condition, right? I mean, would condition bottoming up, right? Like create with the prices drop, or would there be high demand and the high prices, right? So then, yeah. So this is a bit more complicated, but general price is like $30, $40 or $30 per megawatt hour. That's generally the price for all these things. Yeah, so the batteries, yes, even 1 megawatt can help the grid. Actually, the first battery I was involved in a car, it was in 2016. You know, the batteries we built. It was done as a research project. Rather, yeah, it was a 1 megawatt 15-minute battery, and you know, the cost was like below 1 million. I can tell you. And there were questions whether the questions whether it would be profitable. But at the end, after a few years, they found that it was more profitable than what they expected it to be, because it was providing this service what I call FRRS. It's called fast responding regulatory service. It's frequency response, right? When the frequency dips, the battery injects and so on. So you get paid for doing that. So yeah, there's no, basically what I'm saying is there's no limit, right? So any amount helps, right? Okay, I think I answered all, you know, questions here. Oh, there's some more. Let me see. Yeah, I don't have, you know, cost numbers right away to provide here. So there's a question about engineers in Sri Lanka, as per the latest news articles, claim that huge investment is required to achieve such high target. We can understand that. So yeah, these things are technically feasible. All these, you know, energy storage. I mean, you can see the other countries have done that, right? I mean, and as I explained, you know, they have been paid back, right? So the lower cost of energy helps offset the cost. You know, yeah, it has been the case, and you can see the studies by studies, you know, where they showed the saving. Then also the important thing is we don't have, you know, coal or oil or gas, right? So it's foreign exchange, and if the sun shines and the wind blows, why not do our best to make use of that? Say foreign exchange. Yeah. So should we mandate minimum battery storage with all events? So I think that's something to be considered. So I think yeah, this is what, you know, the planning process I mentioned. You know, the stakeholders should get together and discuss these things and take decisions. So that's how these things are happening in the parts of the world. Yeah, there's a lot of detailed questions, and I think we are past the time now, right? So 7:15. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I think I'm glad to have more discussions. So there's a lot of detailed questions. So I think the most important thing is to just, yeah, have, you know, yeah, let's have separate discussions to go into details. Okay. And thank you very much, everyone, for your participation and good questions. And I'm glad that we could have this discussion here. Okay. Thanks.